screen real quick. What up, Brian? How you doing, brother? We're live, Jose. We're just standing here looking at each other. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, we're just two human beings trying to figure this out.
Just two dudes trying to figure it out. Ooh. Looks like we got Brian with us. We got somebody else with us. Hopefully this message finds you doing wonderfully well, flush with leads and opportunities. So what do you want to talk about today, Jose? What do you think the people need to hear about? What do you think they need to be equipped with so that way they can get some physical bread to eat? You know what I mean?
So I have a friend that's a luxury real estate agent.
Yeah.
And he sells about $300 million a year.
Good for him.
One of the top agents in the marketplace. And I actually went on a listing presentation with him 2 days ago. But in my conversations with him, he's basically just telling sellers straight up, like, hey, look, the market's not what it was at some point. Like, meaning like the market's actually bad. And I understand that in different price points, obviously there's more inventory than others. But what I got from it, he was telling me that, look, every transaction is like hairy, and every transaction basically for him, like that he's not able to please sellers right now because obviously they're not getting what they want in terms of prices. So I believe that the people need to continue the pricing conversation. So maybe if you're tired of price reductions, we can talk about presenting offers that are lower.
Well, I think what's true is independent of what I feel like doing, because this is really about what people need. I believe that those two conversations are intimately linked.
I know. Yeah.
They're actually like the same conversation.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I guess maybe we could walk people through a situation from listing appointment where we are managing expectations. We are beginning the process of introducing, right, this price adjustment conversation to the now giving them updates.
Yeah, so basically that process that you walked me through, that the price reduction starts at the listing presentation, which by the way, when you shared that process with me, I was like it was so methodical, bro, like so well thought out that I was like, dude, I had no idea that it actually started at the listing presentation. So it was actually pretty brilliant.
Well, that's good, bro. I'm glad it was helpful or useful. And then progressing through getting a price adjustment.
Okay.
And then after you get the adjustment, the offer comes in less than what you adjusted to. Because is that not, Jose, the marketplace moving forward?
I would say so. Yeah, I would say so.
I believe so. With a super high degree of probability, you will experience, if not all of your transactions will be like that. The majority of them will. The exception will be that one that's like in a fantastic geographic area and it flies off the shelf and somebody makes a full price offer.
I think what also happens too is like, okay, so if the market is going like this, meaning like it's dropping consistently, then you're finding yourselves having to do price reductions. Now, when the market basically goes like this and then it kind of flattens out, it becomes a lot easier, guys. So there's like an adjustment period, and that period could be 6 to 12 months. It could be 3 to 12 months, meaning an adjustment period. And the adjustment period is when there is not any new comps to support where buyers are seeing value in today's marketplace.
Yeah, there's not that many comps to support that the marketplace is actually downward trending.
Drop or drop. So if the marketplace continues a downward, then the 6 to 12 months actually becomes like a lot longer of a period. Or if the marketplace adjusts and then flattens out, it actually becomes like a normal market now because you have new comps to support the existing activity. So now, like, let's say that you have a comp that sold 2 years ago at 1.5, and now the last 2 or 3 comps sold at 1.3. Now it's like, hey, look, this is where the marketplace is today, and it becomes a lot easier. It's that gap period but that can make or break a business. Imagine 6 to 12 months of you not being able to price property correctly and not being able to get buyers and sellers to agree at a certain price point, most businesses will not be able to sustain that. So this conversation that we're having is crucial during that gap period of 6 to 12 months. And then it goes back to like traditional, at that point.
Yeah.
Unless there's more adjustments, like meaning rates go from 7 to 10%, then it's another basically dip at that point.
Agreed. So it's being able to assess when that change is happening very quickly and then making adjustments. So, and then we'll get into it. So
now here's one thing I want to point out. I want to point out, like I was talking to a seller about price and he's like, yeah, maybe I should just keep it. And then I'm like, obviously that's an option. And then I was like, look, remind me again, like what was the goal that you were trying to accomplish when we initially set out, like revisiting the motivation basically.
Yeah.
And to be honest, like a lot of times I didn't find myself revisiting the motivation enough. And that is such a game changer, just revisiting the motivation, because it almost reminds me of like, let's say somebody's got a 10-mile run and at mile 3, it gets hard. And then somebody's like, oh, I'm going to give up. I'm going to stop running. Somebody going like, hey, why are we doing this again? And like revisiting that reason why you're doing that again, that gives you that extra spark to be able to get it to the ultimate goal.
Yeah. And because a lot of times people get caught up with how we get to the end or the ultimate goal and objective versus getting to the ultimate goal.
Getting to the ultimate goal
in their mind of how they thought it was going to be.
It's like, oh, it's like, no.
Yeah. And hey, look, that's an option. You could quit this race right now if you want. My job's to help you. It's never to talk you to do anything. What I'd like to do is just kind of ask you a couple quick questions just to ensure that I'm clear on what your objectives are and what your ultimate desire is in terms of the property and what you're trying to accomplish in your life. Then we'll go over the options that you have at your disposal and whatever you decide, I'll support you 100%. Okay. So the reason why we're reconnecting them with that motivation is because motivation fixes price. And people will tell you one thing, but they'll do something else. If you break down the word motivation, it means like motive to take action. It's a reason for doing something.
Yeah.
We think that we're thinking beings that feel when we're actually feeling beings that think. So you're reconnecting them with that. So let's walk people through that kind of progression. So we're at the listing appointment and we're managing the expectation with regards to price. We have a lot of videos. I know I do and you do on my channel. We have playlists that'll help you to walk like through an in-depth version of that conversation. We'll just kind of do it quickly, right?
Okay.
So, what's really important during that transitional period that you're describing, Jose, is how you frame the conversation. It's the frame that changes.
Okay.
Yeah. So when the marketplace, let's say, is like, uptrending or whatever, that's a particular frame. When it starts to transition, that's a different frame. So I need to be really mindful of setting that frame before we even look at any data. Because I want you, like the frame is going to dictate how you perceive that information and what you see in that information. Yeah. So the purpose
no, let me ask you this. Like, because obviously there's a fine line as well too, because people will ask you like, hey, how's the marketplace right now?
Yeah.
All the time. And like, if you say, hey, look, the marketplace is shit, they're like, hey, look, maybe I shouldn't sell my property right now,
Yeah.
And then at the same time, if you sell, hey, look, the market is great, you're almost like setting like a false
unreasonable expectation.
So let's before we get into that, like let me just ask you, hey Aaron, how's the market right now?
Yeah. So
is it a good time to sell?
It's a really great question. And my answer always is that question is really dependent upon like what your specific goal and objective is.
Mm-hmm.
Is there some headwinds in the fact that that demand has dropped a little bit with regards to, money being, just more expensive as far as interest rates? Sure. Are we still seeing, Jose, properties that are positioned competitively and are in good condition, still getting a lot of interest and sometimes multiple offers? Yes. So ultimately, that's really a question with regards to like what you and Mariela are trying to accomplish and why. So what I'd like to do is just ask you some questions. My goal and objective in doing that is just so I can really understand your situation. And then we can make a decision if now is a good time for you or not. How's that sound?
Okay.
So what am I doing there?
You're revisiting the motivation, basically. Well, I think too, what you're saying, hey, look, has there been some changes? Absolutely. like meaning like interest rates are higher than they were 2 years ago. At the same time, are properties that are priced correctly, are they getting interest and in some cases multiple offers? Absolutely.
That's right.
What about saying something like, hey, look, like if you really look at it, we're like, yes, there has been some adjustments as it relates to rates. At the same time, we're still at record prices comparison to like 10 years ago or something like that.
Yeah, or something like that. Or like, hey, yes, have we gone from 6.5 million transactions to 4 million? Sure. At the same time, when you look historically, over time, 4.5 million transactions is pretty normal in the marketplace. And plus, if you've owned your home for longer than, I don't know, 3-4 years, you probably have seen a pretty big
significant appreciation.
Yeah, in terms of its value without having to do anything, which is pretty cool. So, I guess what I'd like to do at this moment, and my intention doing so is not to be nosy, just so I can get clear on your situation and what you were thinking and what your ultimate goals and objectives are. And then from there, we can decide if this is a good time for you or not. How's that sound?
Sounds fantastic.
And then you drill down. So like, in terms of what you want, Jose, because the home's lovely. I don't need to tell you that. It's in a great area. I know you've done some modifications, and you and Mariela, last time I spoke to you, like you seem to be enjoying it. If you don't mind me asking, what's causing you to even consider putting it on the market and selling it? And then be quiet. And this is where you'll start to tell me, okay, so we're trying to do this, this, and this. All right. And then I'm wondering, is it an option for you to not sell the home and still accomplish that? No. Okay. Is it an option for you to rent the home and still accomplish it? No. Okay. So in order to do that, if you did decide to do it, it would require we get the home sold. Yes. Okay. And then you continue to keep digging and digging and digging. And from that, you'll be able to determine where they are on that spectrum from 0 to 10. Now, what I told our group, that group call that we do, what are you doing, bro? Are you cutting down bushes over there?
No, I think somebody's doing some construction. Hold on.
Yeah.
Hold on 1 second. All right, let me check. What's going on.
He's cutting down trees over there, team.
Oh shit! What is that, bro? I think he's doing some work on. Yeah, no, it's all good. I'll just mute it.
It's all good. We just got to pause construction. He doesn't know we're doing he doesn't know we're doing a live stream, bro.
I'll just mute myself when I'm not talking.
Yeah, that's cool. He doesn't know we're doing a live stream. It's fine.
No, it's not him. It's it's a construction guy downstairs installing some stuff, basically.
I get it. Yeah, so what we're doing there is we're really sifting through to get clarity around like the motivation and what they're looking to accomplish. Oh, and what I was sharing was, bro, on this week's group call, dude, I was like burning the house down because I was like, listen to me, guys. I made everybody unmute themselves and I was like, repeat after me. You ready? I don't meet with anybody who's not an 8, 9, or a 10 motivation. Say it again. I don't meet with anybody who's not an 8 or 10 8, 9, 10 motivation. So meaning like if motivation's on a spectrum, 0 being like I'm going to die here, 10 being I needed to sell it yesterday, you do not meet with people that are not 8, 9s, and 10s. And this is how you can navigate that conversation, right? So he's like, hey, is this a good time to sell? Well, and we just shared with you how to do that. Then you ask questions. And what we're sifting through is motivation. Now, this is part of this process that we're describing. It begins actually, remember how you were saying initially, you're like, hey, it begins at like the pricing portion listing presentation. It actually begins in the prequel. I need to make sure people are 8, 9s, and 10s, right? So making sure I'm really good at that and digging through that information to find out how high their level of motivation is.
Well, I think too, where people struggle is people bluff a lot. I don't know if that happens, happened to you in your career, but I find myself like, I remember being in the presence of an old lady and she's like 92 and her caregiver was there. And he's like, look, I am not selling below 1.2. And her caregiver's right next to me. He's like, well, she needs to go into assisted living. She's like, I'm not selling below 1.2. And I'm like, 1.2 was like ridiculously overpriced, bro. I'm talking about like 300,000 overpriced.
Yeah.
But I was like,
when you look at her and you're like,
I'm like, I don't know, like probability wise, like if I had to like bet some money and I was in Vegas, like, hey, what are the odds that this lady sells at whatever market value is? Like on a bet, I'd probably say 70-30 would be my bet that she will need to sell. So I think too, whenever they're accessing motivation is how do people like think about it from a probability perspective as well too, to be like, okay, like Like, is this person like, I know you're telling me you're not selling, but you're unemployed, you're freaking in foreclosure, and like you see like all these red flags, you're like,
and you're 87 years old. You're like,
I don't know. Like, and you got 300,000 in equity. So I know you're not going into foreclosure, you know?
yeah. Yeah, it makes total sense. So, and that's part of this process, right? Which is getting really, so these are the skills that are going to be required in order to move inventory in this marketplace that we're in, and the one like kind of moving forward, right? One is pre-qualing at a super duper high level and utilizing that kind of probabilities in the back of your mind. It's kind of like you have multiple apps running at the same time. One is the app of asking these questions around clearing the room by room, motivation, time, decision makers. But the second app is like this probability app. Like, what's the probability?
What's the probability of this happening, basically?
That's right.
Because it's not going to be exact.
Exactly. And that's why we're determining. And what I'm suggesting to you is you do not go on that appointment, and you definitely don't take the listing unless it's like 70, like 8% or 80% higher probability they're selling.
Yeah. And then it's also like being able to read between the lines as well, too.
Yeah.
When it's like I remember that guy that's like, hey, look, I'm not selling. He's in foreclosure and he had no job. And I'm like, I don't know. Something's not adding up here, you know? And sure enough, he ended up selling, you know?
Yeah, exactly. All right. So now that we've done that, and let's say now we go and present to Jose. I've asked him, I've cleared the room by room, you know, time, decision makers. I ask him, hey, I've only spoken to you. How does Mariela feel about the move? Oh, she's super excited. Tell me a little bit more about that. Like, just digging. What would happen on the outside chance if you guys had to postpone the move for like, you know, years? It's really not our preference. Okay. And tell me a little bit about why, and like, blah, blah, blah. Right. So we're just digging. Then we book the appointment. We make sure all the decision makers are there. Now is the next skill that you're going to have to deploy is the pricing portion of listing presentation conversation. And that has to do with how you frame it. So you have to be very, very clear in establishing that frame. I think one of the things that people do, Jose, is they don't manage the frame. They just start presenting data. And when they just start presenting data, what ends up happening is the people don't have a way to filter it. Yeah. And you know what else? You know what they're doing, Jose? This is so cool. Okay. You know what they're doing? They end up setting the frame themselves. And you know what their frame is? What the marketplace was 12 months ago. So that's how they're filtering the data. So you want to be really, really clear on how you're filtering, you know, managing that, like setting that frame. And here's how you do that. So, you know, there's other videos on the channel, listing presentation. Go listen to the playlist on how to do that. We're just going to zoom in on this section. So the great news is we really only have to focus on a couple things today during our time together. The first is your motivation to sell this property, which is clear. You definitely want to do it. The second issue is the price. Now I prepared for you, which I sent over to you in preparation for connecting. And I brought with me that market analysis, the purpose of which is really an attempt to make a very educated guess with regards to value. Are you familiar, Jose, with the way buyers determine value? And then you're quiet. And whatever they say, you're like, yeah, essentially they're going to comparison shop. They're going to look at what's active on the market right now and not selling. And then they're going to take a look at what has sold and closed most recently. And from all that information, they're going to make a determination as to where they feel comfortable making you an offer. Does that make sense to you? And they're like, yeah,
it does.
Yeah. So as we review this information, it's really, really helpful to recognize that your neighbors have done us an enormous favor. Do you know what it is?
I don't.
They've tested the market for us at certain prices and it's not working.
Okay.
That's very helpful. Like, that's useful data. We can learn from that. The second piece of this data is what has actually sold and closed most recently. Now, why do you think that information is super helpful to us?
Well, it kind of tells us what the prices have been recently. But just so you know, like, I know that the neighbor across the street, they were going through a divorce. So I know that they sold way below market. The other guy, like, he didn't do any repairs to his house. So I know that he sold like way below market as well, too. And I don't plan on giving my home away either, just so you know.
Yeah. And here's the great news, Jose. I'm not in the business of giving homes away. We're definitely not going to start with yours. And I'm on your team, just so you know. You know, the more obviously we help you to sell the property, the more we get compensated to help you. So, you know, if it was possible to sell for $2 million, I would tell you and we'd go after it. Right.
Yeah.
Now, the other thing that's true is I know, you know, like, I don't need to tell you, ultimately what something's worth is what somebody's willing to pay for it. And this data that we're looking at in terms of like what's sold and closed most recently, it's very helpful because it shows us what people are willing to pay. Now, I'm aware there is a little bit of a variable in terms of like, oh, well, this one sold for this reason and that reason. And our job together as a team is really to try to determine, based on the information we have available to us, where buyers are seeing value for homes that are similar to yours. And from there, it'll come down to strategy, and we'll go over the strategies that you have because I want you to feel comfortable with the one you end up choosing. Now, I do want to share with you that we are noticing a little bit of a shift in the market. Can I explain to you what I mean?
Yes.
Yeah. So what we're seeing is that inventory is beginning to go up a little bit, not dramatically, but it is about 18% year over year. And we're also seeing that homes are sitting on the market a little bit longer. We went from an average days on the market of 12 days to now it's like 62 days.
Okay.
Which is just an indication that homes are taking a little bit longer to sell. And obviously we have these 7% interest rates, right, which have doubled, from 2 or 3 years ago. So as we review this data, again, it's really important to give context to the information. And we'll be doing that along the way, right? So we'll look at this together as a team. We'll see this realistic range emerge. We'll discuss strategy. And then whatever you decide, I'll support you 100%. Fair enough?
Fair enough.
So we're managing that, you see, the frame with which you are about to receive this information and how to look at it, right? Also notice I politely, first I aligned myself with you when you said, hey, my neighbor sold for this and this and this. I aligned myself by saying, yeah, I get that. I see exactly where you're coming from. I also aligned myself, hey, I'm on your team, trying to net the most. If we could sell it for 2 million, might as well do that. I get compensated more. At the same time, I take the responsibility you provide me with really seriously, which is to protect the value of your property and help you get top dollar. So I'm committed to giving you open and honest information to help you to accomplish your goals and objectives. And whatever you decide to do with it is entirely up to you. Fair enough?
I also think that the frame is important to understand when to install that frame. So like, let's say that the property next door, like sold at 1.3, like a week ago. Like it may not be necessary for you to say, it's not necessary for you to say like, hey, look, it's 62 days because the property literally next door sold in 10 days, less than a week ago. So I think it's also like understanding when to input these frames and in what situations to use common sense, guys. I guess that's what I'm trying to say basically.
Yeah, and I love that. And
because a lot of people are like, oh, like every single presentation, I've got to say and paint this context when if they want 1.2 and there's a property that sold at $1,250,000 and it's very similar to them and they want 1.2, hey, it's going to sell, Yeah,
agreed. And I think it's also, we're speaking, I appreciate that for people because I know that, that's their tendency, like, oh, do it this way every time. There is some nuance here. What we're talking about is specifically is this gap in the marketplace when it begins to shift. And let's say a comp is 3 months old, but the problem is, and I was talking with Jose before, is that means, let's say somebody's like, oh, that sold 3 months ago. I'm like, yeah, I appreciate that. And what's interesting about that is when you think about it, and here's where you pull a really good Jose. You ready? You do this. You're like, yeah, like 1, 2, 3 months ago.
We give him an Oscar. That was a great performance.
It usually takes like 45 to 60 days to get an offer. Yeah. So what that means, Jose, is that's actually a 5-month-old comp because when they agreed, the buyer and the seller, they agreed 5 months ago. Does that make sense to you?
Now, how would you say this? Now, like, let me follow up that. That's actually a 5-month-old comp. Now, would you say 5 months ago there was more certainty in the real estate market, or would you say that there's less certainty now, or something along? Play with me on that. How would you?
Yeah, so it would be like, well, I'm curious. 5 months ago, like, let me ask you a question. How much do you think has changed in the world, economically, geopolitically, in the last 5 months?
There's been some changes.
There's been a lot of changes, right? And I'm curious, when people feel uncertain or their certainty meter kind of drops, what do you think that does to their purchasing decisions, particularly a large purchase and sometimes the biggest purchase they'll ever make in their life?
Well, in some cases, they become more conservative.
Exactly. And just by you saying that demonstrates that you're beginning to recognize that those factors are influencing what we're seeing in the marketplace. And it's the reason why, average days on market has gone up, and the inventory is beginning to rise. Does that make sense to you?
How did you ask that question 5 months ago? How did you ask it again?
Yeah, so I'm curious, like over the last 5 months, how much would you say has changed economically, geopolitically? In the world? And then just be quiet and they're like, oh yeah, like a lot's going on, dude. Like, exactly. And I guess I'm wondering, were you aware? I don't know if you know this, but in the last 5 months, do you know what actually happened like 3 weeks ago?
Mm-mm.
Well, for the first time in 100 years, the credit rating of the United States actually was lowered. Went from AAA perfect credit to now we're at a AA1. Did you know that?
I didn't.
Yeah. So, I'm always trying to think for our clients, like how could this potentially affect the real estate market? So let's walk through this for a second. So let's say me and you, if we had a credit rating and our credit rating goes down, what does that do to the amount of interest we have to pay if we borrow money?
Probably goes up.
Agreed. So the way that we operate and the way that we get money to fund our stuff is the United States government sells bonds. Well, now that our credit rating has gone down, we have to compensate investors because we're considered more risky because our balance sheet isn't good. So what do you think that does to the interest we're going to have to pay?
Probably goes up.
Exactly. And then that ends up affecting the 10-year treasury note, which ends up affecting mortgage rates. So let me ask you a question. With that happening and taking place in the marketplace, do you think that has anything to do with inventory rising, stuff sitting on the market longer, people not having certainty?
Yeah. Yeah, I do believe that. But I mean, there's still stuff selling, right?
Oh, yeah, for sure. Still stuff selling. My intention in painting this picture is not like doom and gloom. Instead, it's to give context to this information. Because what I'm aware of is what our goal and objective is in reviewing this is really to get an accurate assessment of reality. And data without context really doesn't mean that much, right? So the goal here is to really get as clear a picture, because look, nobody has a crystal ball, myself included. At the same time, we like to think about things in probabilities. So let me ask you a question. With everything going on in the world, with what I just shared with you about rates and how with a high degree of probability, interest rates will stay higher for an extended period of time, does it seem probable that moving forward, we're going to continue to experience a marketplace with headwinds? And in fact, there could be downward pressure on pricing. Or does it seem more probable that it'll be gangbusters and, prices will continue to jump up the way they have over the last 3 or 4 years?
Yeah. I don't know, man. So should I just hold on to it?
Maybe. That's really a question of what you're trying to accomplish and why. Because look, I'm not here to twist your arm and talk you into doing anything. So let me ask you a couple questions, and then, that'll dictate the options and choices that you have. I'm aware that the only reason to hold on to it would be is that if you held on to it, you'd be able to make more money. Would you agree?
Correct.
All right. So when you say hold on to it, were you thinking like 6 months or a year, or were you thinking like 5 years?
6 months.
Okay. So then let's think about this together, because if it makes sense, we'll do it. If not, we may need to think of a different option. With these factors, right, of the macro factors of what's happening, which we just described in the world, economically, credit rating going down for the first time in 100 years. And then we see our second data point is inventory is beginning to rise in Ventura County. Not enormously, but it is going up 17, 18%. We're seeing the average days on market go up, which means that homes are sitting on the market for longer. We're also seeing that 50% of all the homes that do go under contract need price reductions. And that's data from the multiple listing service. Let me ask you a question. How probable does it seem that if we waited 6 months, you'd be able to get a meaningful amount of more money? Or does it seem more probable that if you wait, you may actually get less?
I don't know. I know the problem is I need to net this exact amount.
I get that. And when people tell me they need, there's usually 2 ways that goes, right? So most of what we say we need, we just merely want, right? We need air, water, food, and shelter, and a little bit of love. So when you say need, Tell me a little bit more about that. Like, is it really a preference? Like, in other words, if you had to sell this property for a little bit less than what your expectations were, could you still make the move happen?
I could.
Or,
I wouldn't be able to pay off the next property in cash, basically.
I understand. So then tell me this, right? Because I'm respectful of that. What's the ultimate goal and objective that you're trying to accomplish? Like, let's say you sold this home and you get to the next destination and the next prop. Like, how would your life improve in some way?
Obviously, like if I got to the next place, like my expenses would be lower for sure. And I'd have a lot less maintenance to deal with. Meaning like the main thing is like this is a 3-acre property. It's a lot of maintenance for somebody my age, you know?
Yeah, I get that.
It sounds sexy, but it's just a lot of maintenance.
Yeah, sounds great at first, but then when you roll up your sleeves, you're like, man, this is a lot.
A lot of work.
So I understand that kind of simplifying things. And let's say you simplify things, like what will you do with all that extra time?
Probably just chill.
Yeah. And you know what's interesting? I can hear in your voice when you said that to me, you smiled. So let's say you're chilling. Like, what does chilling entail for you? Is it like spending time with family?
It just means doing what I want when I want, basically.
Yeah, that's awesome. And tell me this, at this stage in your life, Jose, how important is that to you?
It's important, yeah.
Yeah. So being that that's the case, you have a few options and choices at your disposal. Whatever you decide, I'll support you 100%, okay? The first option is you postpone selling it. We wait. We cross our fingers and we hope and wish and pray that all of this data that we're seeing is wrong. And we revisit this conversation 6 to 12 months from now. My sincere concern, Jose, based on this data, is that with a very high degree of probability, through no fault of your own or mine, just because of market dynamics, it would be less than what you could get today. The second option is you just reframe your expectation on how this actually happens. So you sell the property and maybe you get a tiny small mortgage on the next one. And over time you can, pay that off. The long game is that you're in the new property and you have all of this new time to chill and enjoy yourself. Because here's what I know, Jose, the one thing that we spend it, that once we spend it, we never ever get it back, is time. You could spend your time here trying to squeeze out, some more money, or you could spend it doing the things that you like to do with the people you like to do them with. And only you can decide how valuable that is to you.
Yeah.
So I guess my question is again, based on what you want and based on what you value most at this stage in your life, what do you think we should do?
Yeah, exactly.
Wait, you got to do the, go ahead. I can't wait till I get mine set up. We're gonna be going back and forth.
You know what the fun part is, that you get to pick a bunch of different like audios. Like you could even pick songs like. Yeah.
Yeah, bro. I did what you did. I bought the thing, so I have access to all the sounds. Me and Ricky just have to figure out how to get it to like actually sound right. But we'll figure it out. But again, like this process,
I think you got to start off by like just paying the Wi-Fi bill first. If you pay the Wi-Fi bill, then we can keep the internet consistent.
Yeah. He's so funny. Hey, isn't he so funny, bro? Hey, stick to real estate, bro. Stick to real estate. Yeah. So this, like, I'm aware that all of these conversations are linked.
It's 100%. Yeah. And there's recurring ones too.
Yeah.
And so then,
go ahead.
Even the one where it's like, I think the one I'm working on now is this one. And maybe you can kind of like go over it. But what I'm noticing is that what I like to do is revisit some of the reasons why you're doing this and why, and then giving you a couple of options as to what's next. So basically what I'm noticing is that revisiting the reasons is just the motivation, a couple of options. You give them a couple of options a lot of the time. So that's like a recurring one. Yeah. There's only a few reasons why properties don't sell. That's another one right there. And then one that I think that I think would help a lot of people is the one where it's like, look, obviously, like I don't have a crystal ball, and like neither me or you can say with like 100% certainty, hey, look, this is what the marketplace is going to do. At the same time, if we look at this like from a probability perspective, there's a couple key things happening in the market or the economy right now. I like to share them with you so that obviously like we can look at it not from an exact, but like more of a probability perspective. Like what is more probable to happen? Not what we would like to happen, but what is more probable to happen?
Yeah.
That's
And then
the part. If we can rephrase that, how would you rephrase it and then go over the different things?
Yeah. So what you said is great. It's like, yeah. So, I don't have a crystal ball and I'm not going to pretend to. And anybody who tries to tell you that they do, Jose, they're not being honest with you. And they're probably, trying to take a bunch of money from you. So, at the same time, I find for myself that I usually make better choices when I think in terms of probabilities. Now, in order to do that, I have to gather some key information. So what I'd like to do is to go over with you some key kind of data points in terms of what's happening in the marketplace. So that way we don't end up with an exact, but more likely than not, we'll see a direction. And then we can make a choice directionally, right? In terms of what serves you best. So before, and then we'll go over some options and choices that you have at your disposal. So that way you can decide what you feel is best. Now, before we get into that data in terms of the marketplace, what I'd like to do is just revisit the reasons why you're even trying to do this to begin with, because I find that that's really helpful and will add context to the conversation. So tell me again, and then revisit motivation, go down that path. Then, okay, so with that being said, let's have a conversation about like what's happening in the marketplace, and then give them 1, 2, and 3, and then ask them. So based on that data, if you were going to make a bet, right? Does it seem more probable that if we wait, we'd be able to get more money? Or does it seem more probable that if we waited, perhaps we could get like less? And then shut up.
Now, how do you determine which data points to go over? That's the part that like, because I've heard you talk about like the bond thing that's going on right now about the credit rating.
I go from macro to micro.
Okay.
So one data point is macro. What's happening in the economy? Like what's happening with interest rates? Like what's happening macro. Then I go micro to data like average days on market. How many homes are requiring price reductions? Yeah. What's happening with the inventory year over year? Because that's the micro and the macro gives us a picture.
Do you say that to them? Like, hey, look, like let's look at it from a macro perspective and also like a micro perspective, meaning like what's happening in the economy, the world overall.
Yes.
At the same time, what's happening like just in our local market, like meaning like what's happening with listings in our area, meaning days on the market.
100%. So you could even say that, like, I find that, in order for us to get the clearest picture as to what's going on in the current market, it requires us to look at two pieces of data. One is kind of what's happening in a broad sense, right? Like macro. And then the second is what's happening here in our localized market, right? Kind of micro. And from those two pieces of data, 3 pieces of data, because we may get one from, the larger one and a couple from the smaller ones. And I wouldn't say that. So what I would say is like from those 2 pieces of data, we'll be able to get the clearest picture as to where we're at now, because price, Jose, is a snapshot in time. Does that make sense to you?
Yeah.
And from that information, what we'll end up with is not a pinpoint to the penny. More often than not, we'll be able to see a direction emerge. And that's really what we're after, right? So we'll go over that information together as a team. We'll see this kind of direction come to the surface. Then we'll go over options and choices that you and your family have, right? Because I'm here to help you. I'm never here to twist your arm, talk you into doing anything. And whatever you decide, I'll support you 100%. Fair enough?
Now, how do you present the facts so that they're not subjective? What I mean by subjective, that means like a lot of times, like people like to disagree with things.
Yeah.
So like meaning like, let's go over like the macro stuff. Like, how do you make it so it's like very difficult to disagree with?
Yeah. So what I would say is something like, I really want to do my best, because I find that like, opinions, everybody has them, including me. Everybody has an opinion. The facts don't lie. So the information we're going to go over is just factual in terms of what we're seeing in the marketplace. This isn't like my opinion about the information.
And that's like you framing it basically to
exactly.
like
framing it to where they're not. Yeah. So
because that's what in some cases after you go over that information, their tendency is to fight it. So if you frame it a little bit different, like, hey, look, like the next information, just to clarify, it's not my opinion. These are actual like pieces of data of what's happening right now. And I want to make sure that we're both clear that it's not an opinion that I have. It's just pieces of data that we've been able to find that will help paint a picture as to how to move forward.
That's right. Yeah. So the first piece of data is something that took place in a broad sense, right? Kind of this macro level that will definitely have an impact on real estate.
Yeah.
And then you share, okay, here's what happened. Did you know that? And most people didn't. Like when I shared it with you 2 weeks ago, you didn't even know it. You were like, whoa, really? So, yeah, were you aware of that? And they'll be like, no. It's like, yeah, how do you think that's going to affect the market? And then just be quiet and see what they say. And then you can kind of go into that explanation. And so now what we can do is now we can go and look at some data or facts in terms of what's happening locally. So the first fact that is, because we study these numbers all the time, and I could send you the spreadsheet of it, is year-over-year inventory increase. Now, I'm curious, when inventory goes up, what is that usually a sign of?
I don't know.
Well, it means that demand might be softening a little bit because the supply is increasing. Does that make sense to you?
It does, yeah.
Okay. So what we've seen year over year is that the inventory here in Ventura County has gone up 18%. So it's not a dramatic, wild increase, but it is meaningful. Okay. So that's a trend. That's a direction. The second trend that we're seeing is that 50% of all the homes on the market here in Ventura County required a price reduction prior to going under contract. Now, what do you think that is pointing towards in the marketplace? Does that seem like a market that's like robust and things are flying off the shelf? Or does it seem like you got to be really competitive in terms of pricing in order to get the buyers that are in the marketplace?
Probably you got to be competitive.
Agreed. So that's a direction. Yeah. So, and then the other localized piece of data that we're seeing is that the average days on market has increased. It's gone from 18 days to now it's 65 days. So that means that homes are sitting on the market longer. So what direction does that point into? Does that seem like this is a marketplace that has lots of momentum, or is it pointing to a marketplace that's beginning to slow down and cool off?
Yeah, probably slow it down and cool down.
Exactly. So just by you saying that demonstrates that you're beginning to recognize when we look at these factors, both broad and local, I guess the question is which direction is all of this information pointing towards in terms of the real estate market and prices?
Well, in this case, and this is what I love, when you asked a key question earlier, should I just hold on to it? And then I think you asked a follow-up question. You said, okay, if you did hold on to it, were you hoping like 6 to 12 months? Well, or were you thinking 5+ years, basically?
Yeah. So first, don't be attached to the outcome. When you said that, I was like, maybe. Like, yeah, maybe. I mean, it's really dependent on what you're trying to accomplish and why. Now, for most people, I don't know if this is true for you, but for most people, the only reason they're considering waiting is because they think if they wait, they'd be able to get more money. Is that what you're thinking?
Yeah, correct.
Okay. And then when you were thinking of waiting, in your mind, were you thinking 6 months or a year? Or were you thinking 3 to 5 years?
Probably 6 months to a year, or maybe less than 6 months even, you know?
I see. So if you knew that waiting would mean substantially longer, that's not something you would be interested in.
Definitely not 5 years for sure. Okay. But I don't think it would take that long, right?
Here's the thing. Again, I'm not pretending to have a crystal ball. At the same time, do you know the last time that interest rates were this high? Do you know how long they stayed high for?
I don't.
A decade. We're only 3 years into rates being at 7%. So if it makes sense to wait, we'll do it because I'm here to help you, whether it's 6 months, 12 months from now, I'll be selling real estate at that time. Let's look at some data and information so we can see how probable that is, because everything's possible. The question is how probable. And I find that I make better choices and decisions when I think in probabilities, right? Because there's no such thing as like an exact. So let's review some information, both in a broad sense and in a hyper localized sense, so we can see directionally the direction the marketplace seems to be going in. And then we can assess how probable that is, right? That if you wait a couple months, you'd be able to get more. And if so, great. If not, then we could come up with a different solution. Does that sound fair?
Okay.
And then we go into what we just went into.
Even if you just went into it already, because I asked you after that, I was like, should I just wait?
Oh yeah. So like you're like, well, maybe. And then so if we already went into that,
yeah,
we already went over all of that, I'd be like, well, maybe. And that's really dependent upon what your ultimate goals and objectives are. So what I'd like to do now is just really get like extreme clarity around what you want and why you want it. And then from there, we can determine as a team, like what makes sense for you. And just to be clear, Jose, whatever you decide is perfectly fine. I'll support you 100%. Fair enough?
Because I remember this property that I just closed on. The guy was like, hey, look, should I just hold on to it for another 6 months to 12 months, basically?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So then I would start to ask the questions. Again, what, like, let's say you sell it. Like, ultimately, how would your life improve in some way? And what would that mean for you? And how important is that to you at this stage in your life? So being that it's really important, and then looking at the context of the marketplace and the probability that if you waited, you know, that you'd be able to get more. And I think we both agree that that probability is pretty small. What do you think we should do? And then just be quiet. And then they'll be quiet. They'll look exactly like Jose does. He'll be furrowing. He'll be like, But the decision making is made in silence.
Like this?
No, it's a little different, bro. That's like when you like I don't know, like when you show up like 7 minutes late to a call, you're like walking in, you're like yeah, does anybody notice? So yeah, dude, I think again, I want to stress these skills are all, this is like, it's really part of one long conversation. Like, and it begins at the, like in pre-qual, it continues in the pricing portion, it continues in asking for a reduction, it continues when you get an offer that comes in less than the asking price. Like this is one long conversation. And if you view it that way, I think you will approach it accurately and you'll get better outcomes. Because I think a lot of agents, Jose, just imagine like, oh, I'm going to talk to you about it at the price, like at the listing presentation, that's it. No, it's going to be a revisiting like over throughout this whole process.
Well, I think it just depends on what market you're in. Because like in 2020, like you're right, that's not even negotiating. You're just like basically like collecting offers, you know. And then in a market like this, you're actually having to talk to people about their motivation. And even in some cases, like I had a neighbor who called me up. He's like, hey, I want you to sell my property. He was an expired, lives across the street, 2 doors down. And I told the guy, I'm like, what price do you want? And he goes, the same price that I had it listed with. I'm like, hey, to be honest, like I wouldn't be interested in the listing at that price. And when I told them that, it was almost like, oh shit, nobody has ever told me that.
Yeah.
Before, basically. And he's like, okay, no problem. And then he calls me back. He's like, hey, no, in the same conversation, he's like, at what price would you be interested? I'm like, to be honest, I wouldn't be interested in anything above 1.4.
Wow. What did he say?
He basically listed the property with me and he sold it.
He did?
Yeah. But to be honest, I hadn't really done that very much in my career. Like, hey, I'm not interested. But the fact that I live on the same street, bro, I was like, dude, I don't want an overpriced, like, I don't want my sign out. I don't want the neighbors talking about it. I was just like, look, I'm not interested, bro. You know, because I love where I live, you know, and I didn't want that. And I was just like, but it was interesting because the approach with the luxury agent on the presentation was very similar as well, too. Yesterday, it was like, look, I'm not interested. And it was almost like his reputation was so good that it was kind of like, I still want to work with you, you know, like,
yeah. Like, okay, but I still want to like do business, right?
Yeah.
That's good. That's great, dude. And I think if you choose to, because I know you're starting to take more and more of those like higher end listings, I think not only with your skill set that you have and everything that we like role play here and everything, but adding that on top of it
Yeah. Where it's
Just
like, hey, look,
continuing.
unfortunately at that price, I would humbly decline the opportunity to work
Yeah,
together.
like, listen, I really appreciate the opportunity. I do, to be with you and have this conversation. Unfortunately, at that price, I'd have to humbly decline the opportunity.
Yeah. And what he was saying was on some higher end listings, he's like, look, sometimes it's better that they list it with somebody else. And then you come in on the second round,
Yeah.
basically. And then on the second round, they're like more humble. And that's what happened with that listing across the street. Like he ended up, I never talked to him about it. He just listed with a neighborhood specialist. He priced it at 1,565 and it just sat there. And then on the second round, he called me or he came to my door, knocking on my door. And it was funny. I was in basketball shorts.
Yeah, just chilling. You're like, what's up?
Yeah.
Yeah. Hey, in basketball shorts, chilling. And you're like, hey,
no.
really?
So I was
I wouldn't
upstairs and somebody was working on my property. They come up, they're like, hey, somebody's looking for you out front. So I go out there. He's like, hey, can you come over to my house? And I'm like, I look at him because I didn't know who he was. I was like, for what? Like, I'm like, for what? Like, he's like, oh, I'm not sure if you noticed my property came off the marketplace and I want to interview you. And then that's when I was like, hey, what price do you want? Because I already
in
knew
basketball
that.
shorts. You're like, yeah, what price do you want? And then he was like this, and you're like, yeah, dude, honestly, like at that price, like I would have to humbly decline the opportunity in basketball shorts.
Yeah.
I love it, dude. It's so good. It's so good. Awesome, bro. Well, listen, this has been, I think, very helpful or useful to everybody.
Oh man, I didn't realize it was 50 minutes already, bro.
Yeah, bro.
I thought we had like another 30 minutes. It went by fast.
Yeah, time flies, bro. So yeah, I'm looking at comments here. Yeah, appreciate you guys. Keep dialing in. You know what I mean? We are 1,000% committed to continue to equip you with what you need as the marketplace pivots and changes. We are entering into a season of being 1,000% skill based. And, we want to be a resource for you to make sure that you have everything you need in order to be as productive as you possibly can be.
And here's what I would recommend for you guys. And I'm even doing it myself. I'm finding myself, because this is one of the areas where I mentioned this to you very candidly, like Aaron is an expert in the pricing portion of the presentation. And it's one of those areas where I'm committed to getting better. So I'm going back here and I'm listening to the live calls like on a run or something like that. And it's extremely helpful. So what I would advise you guys is go back, listen to the 5 or 6 weeks that we've been talking about price, listen to it while you're driving, listen to it while you're running, listen to it while you're doing just random things. And you'll start to pick up on things and you'll start to understand it better, as well as role play it, chant it. We are committed to helping you guys go pro. That's what we're committed to do. We're committed to helping you guys go professional in selling real estate so you can make millions of dollars a year.
Let's go. Let's be pros. Talk soon, guys. Peace.
Later.